On a hot summer's day in Athens, Georgia, a young boy sits in the shade of a white oak tree. The tree has sheltered him many times, and he makes it a promise that will last centuries, that the tree shall be named owner of itself, and no one shall ever cut it. Welcome back to the FYI Show. Today we'll be talking about the tree that owns itself, and we aren't talking about Groot. This is a story that goes back centuries, and raises all kinds of interesting questions. Could it ever be chopped down? Can a tree truly own itself? What does it mean if the state protects it anyway? We'll start this episode with a story. A young boy grows up in Athens, Georgia, and is very fond of his tree. So fond, in fact, that when he is all grown up and successful, he deeds the tree and the surrounding land to the tree, preventing anyone else from being able to chop it down. This is the story of Colonel William Jackson. Having such a fondness for his great white oak tree, at some point between 1820 and 1832, he wrote a deed for the tree and the land surrounding it to be owned by the tree itself. Since only the owner of the property would be allowed to chop down the tree on it, his tree would be granted complete immunity forever, no matter what his ancestors or anyone else wanted. This would mean that if you accidentally drove into the tree, you could get charged with vehicular tree slaughter. Or at least that's how the story goes. History gets a little fuzzy sometimes, and the law might not quite work that way. Historians, looking back at this folktale, find the earliest recording of it in a magazine from 1890. In an issue of the Weekly Banner, the deed, which we will now show on the screen, supposedly says this. Feel free to pause the video to read it. It has a lot of big words and I didn't really want to say them. Anyways, the deed itself is lost to time. Some historians say it probably never even existed, which makes me happy that I didn't just put a lot of effort to read it out loud. The best information we have is that in the Weekly Banner article, which itself said that there were few alive that remember the tale, even in 1890. So, it's hard to be sure that the story happened as it's often told. Indeed, some records show that William Jackson grew up elsewhere, so the childhood part of the story, at least, is quite unlikely to be true. However, we do have one bit of solid evidence: the tree itself. The deed was issued sometime before 1833, but the tree itself survived, unchopped and unchallenged, until 1942, when after a long period of decline due to storm damage and rot, the tree eventually collapsed. It was, however, swiftly replaced. The local community, led by the Athens Junior Ladies Garden Club, planted a new tree. This new tree, grown from an acorn from the original tree, took root as the son of the tree that owns itself. If the old tree had died, its deed was now passed on to its next of kin. The new tree was dedicated in 1946 in a ceremony attended by the Garden Club, who have become the main advocates for the tree, and supported by the local parish. This tree lasts to this day, set apart by a low wall and some weathered stone plaques detailing the tree's history. In fact, its history and interesting stories still attracts visitors today. So, what of the deed? Does it stand? Would it hold up in court if someone challenged it? Well, that's where things get interesting. The classical legal answer is that the deed means nothing. Common law. The law, as decided by past court decisions, would demand that the recipient of a deed have the legal capacity to receive it, and that they receive and accept the deed. You can only take ownership of a deed once you acknowledge it. Well, the legal capacity of a tree is spurious enough, but I imagine the quickest and easiest challenge to the tree's ownership is acceptance, unless the tree has vocally or in writing acknowledged its ownership of itself, which would be surprising to say the least. The deed is meaningless. I know this is what we expected, but I assure you it will be okay. This is because the classical legal answer doesn't tell the whole story. Part of the reason the tree stands to this day is that it is the policy of the local government of the Athens-Clarke county to protect the tree as if it owned itself. While the tree may not technically be its own owner, the city has agreed to act as though it does for the sake of the community and the history of the tree. So, what's the difference? Well, depends who you ask. There are two main schools of thought about law: natural law and positive law. If you believe in natural law, you believe that law exists, independent of people. Whether law is given by God, morals, or ethical philosophy, natural lawyers say that the concepts of law exist, and we should try identify and follow them. In the view of natural law, the distinction between the tree's self-ownership and protection by public policy is very meaningful, since the tree cannot own itself. Its protection only exists because the state wants it to. It would be completely justified then for the state to chop down the tree. It's their tree after all, so it would be simply incorrect to call it the tree that owns itself. Law positivists may differ. They say that broadly speaking, the law is what we make it. Whether it is a social construct within a community, or a set of rules decided by a specific government, without that community or government, the word law has no meaning. They would say that the tree may very well own itself, for no other reason than the fact that the community recognises it. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't need a deep and complex philosophical reason. If we all treat the tree like it owns itself, then that's all there is to it. So, what do you think? Does the law exist outside of human interaction? Can a tree own itself? Did the story even happen? Let us know down in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe for more interesting videos. Thank you for watching, and we hope you learned something new today.